Friends, if you haven't yet, you might want to take a seat because what I'm about to say will probably surprise you, but we have to tell the truth. It turns out that Trump-supporting conservative commentator Ben Shapiro, well, he was right about the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol in 2021, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Yep, I said it. That wasn't a glitch. Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire Ben Shapiro, the guy who endorsed Donald Trump, who voted for Donald Trump, who fundraised for Donald Trump in the 2024 election cycle. Well, he was correct about the January 6th attack. What am I talking about? Well, nobody can speak for Ben Shapiro better than Ben Shapiro, so I'm just going to let Ben Shapiro take it away.
It turns out we now have over a dozen police officers who are injured. There are 4 people who are dead. 1 person was shot. 3 people died in medical emergencies yesterday. That's as bad an event as I have ever seen in American public life. Frankly, I think that in many ways, it's the worst thing to happen to the United States of America since 9/11. It was cataclysmically awful. Cataclysmically awful. Obviously, a very different sort of thing, considering that 9/11 was a foreign terror attack ending with mass carnage and mass death. But the grave damage done to the sense of democracy, to the propriety of a republic, and to the functional workings of our government yesterday, it was pretty awful. It was pretty awful, people. It turns out we now...
Well said, Ben. Ben Shapiro was right about the attack on the United States Capitol. Ben Shapiro. Ben. Well said, Ben. And you might be thinking, okay, well, surely, that's just a fluke, right? Or maybe a deep fake. It's neither of these things. As a matter of fact, I want to play one more clip where Ben Shapiro used a very, very particular word that if you use now to describe MAGA, or to describe, rather, the January 6th attack, MAGA will freak the hell out. But here's Ben Shapiro using that word. See if you catch it.
It is inexcusable, unjustifiable, awful on every level, disgusting on every level. Just terrible, terrible. When you have rioters taking over the U.S. Capitol building, the seat of American democracy, and when you have those rioters saying that they are doing so in the name of the President of the United States, and when you have them doing that to the legislative branch of the government, and when you have those people, they are rioters, they are not protesters, okay? As soon as you commit an act of vandalism or violence, you are no longer in the category of protester, you are now a rioter. And unlike some folks who have justified riots based on the perspective of the rioters, if you're a criminal, you're a criminal, and you should go to jail. You should go to jail. And this was an attempted act of insurrection. I mean, technically speaking, that's what it was. It is inexcusable, unjust.
What? It was what? What was it, Ben? One more time.
The category of protester, you are now a rioter. And unlike some folks who have justified riots based on the perspective of the rioters, if you're a criminal, you're a criminal, and you should go to jail. You should go to jail. And this was an attempted act of insurrection. I mean, technically speaking, that's what it was.
Ben! Well said, Ben! Well said. Worst day in political history since 9/11. It was a violent riot. These people were doing it, acting in service of the sitting president of the United States. It was an attempted insurrection. Well said, Ben. Well said, Ben Shapiro of 2021. Whatever the hell happened to that guy? I mean, it was like, what happened to that guy? Seriously, what happened to that guy? Well, that guy, I don't know if like a doppelganger clubbed him over the head and replaced him, or if, maybe Trump showed up with one of those like Men in Black, like pens where it just flashes and like it takes away your memory, or maybe Ben Shapiro is like actually an unprincipled person who grades his side and his preferred candidate on a curve blatantly, even though he claims to be principled and doesn't actually believe in things and will just say what he needs to in order to win. Guess that's likely too. But the bottom line is, by the very next year, 2022, Ben Shapiro, or his doppelganger, was saying shit like this. January 6, 2022. It was not a coup or an insurrection, nor was it criminally charged as such. It was not a turning point for the republic or a referendum on American political violence. But Ben, how can that be? I refer you to Ben.
Folks who have justified riot to vandalism or violence, you are no longer in the category of protester, you are now a rioter. And unlike some folks who have justified riots based on the perspective of the rioters, if you're a criminal, you're a criminal, and you should go to jail. You should go to jail. And this was an attempted act of insurrection. I mean, technically speaking, that's what it was.
But Ben now says it wasn't an insurrection. Wait, one more time. Wait a minute.
Go to jail. You should go to jail. And this was an attempted act of insurrection. I mean, technically speaking, that's what it was.
Oh, okay. Well, then how is it that, okay, a year after that, in 2023, remember, folks, it's a dangerous insurrection when Trump supporters do it, but it's an act of bravery or virtue when trans activists in Oklahoma are teachers union stooges in Wisconsin. So he's denigrating a year later the idea that it's an insurrection, and then 2 years later denigrating the idea that it's an insurrection. What the hell happened, Ben? I mean, you grew a beard, like I suppose in between January 6, 2021 and those other dates. Did the beard change things, Ben? Did the beard change your mind? Is the beard tweeting right now, Ben? Did the beard take over? I don't know, but I know at least the beard of the 5 o'clock shadow was also present during a conversation about a year ago with friend of the show, liberal streamer Destiny. And Ben Shapiro said something. I remember having a conversation with Destiny minutes before he was to sit down with Lex Friedman and Ben Shapiro. And I told him, I'm like, see if you can get Shapiro to confront him over the fact that he seemingly grades Trump and MAGA on a curve compared to Biden and the Democrats. And you know what stunned both Destiny, Stephen, and me was what Ben Shapiro volunteered during the course of that conversation, shamelessly.
We talk about like not grading presidents on a curve, but then earlier we said we take Biden's rhetoric.
Oh, no,
more
I totally
seriously
grade
than Trump's.
Trump. I 100% grade presidents on a curve. Are you kidding?
Oh, okay.
What? Like you could even hear it. Like Destiny's looking down because you could even hear his voice jumped up an octave. He's like, "Oh, okay," because he probably didn't expect Shapiro to just shamelessly admit it. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that. I mean, we knew that was what Shapiro was doing, but here he is on one of the biggest podcasts, in the world, just engaging with what many people regard as his liberal counterpart, a prolific, esteemed debater. He just volunteers that he's not principled whatsoever, and that he does grade his preferred political proxies on a curve compared to his political opponents. One more time.
In favor of Trump. And this was brought up earlier in terms of like, we talk about like not grading presidents on a curve, but then earlier we said we take Biden's rhetoric.
Oh, no,
more
I totally
seriously
grade
than
Trump.
Trump's.
I 100% grade presidents on a curve. Are you kidding?
Oh, okay.
I grade pretty much everybody on a curve.
then I feel like-
I don't treat my 7-year-old
I
the
feel
same way
like-
that I treat my 9-year-old.
Sure, but
And
I don't
treat Trump the same way
like
treat
that
Obama.
it feels like we're treating Donald Trump like a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old. I think we should treat him like the president of the United States. I don't think having a president that has taken like concrete steps to prevent the
Did you catch that? One more time.
No, I 100% grade presidents on a curve. Are you
Look at his face.
kidding?
Oh, okay.
I grade Obama.
It feels like we're treating Donald Trump like a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old. I think we should treat him like the president of the United States. I don't think
Look at Shapiro's face. He starts to roll his eyes, and he's like, wait a minute. Should we treat a man who's nearly 80 years old, who was the president of the United States, and is at this time campaigning to be president of the United States again?
having a president
Should we grade him on a curve or treat him like a 7 or 8-year-old?
that has taken like concrete
He just like, no, that's stupid. Of course we should treat the most powerful man in the world like a 7 or 8-year-old. And by the way, not only should we do that, we should endorse him, fundraise for him, vote for him, prefer him to be in office. Imagine if the shoe were ever on the other foot. Ben Shapiro had a particular hatred for President Obama. By the way, fun fact, literally he wrote a book. No, actually 2 fun facts. President Obama was referred to as a fascist by Ben Shapiro in his second term over a State of the Union address. The same Ben Shapiro, by the way, who will clutch his pearls if you use that particular F word to describe anything MAGA related, number one. Number two, in 2014, literally wrote a book about prosecuting former President Barack Obama. How about that? He was a big fan of investigating, prosecuting, jailing presidents, as long as they were black Democrats. But then if you go to investigate or arrest a white Republican because you grade him on a curve, because you treat him like your 7 or 8 or 9-year-old, Ben, very strange, then that's a no-go zone. Fun fact about Ben Shapiro. Just so shameless, so despicable. So the insurrection word is something that gets brought up a lot. And there have been lengthy debates about this that Destiny's participated in. Friend of the show, friend of mine, Pisco, liberal attorney. He has also made this case. I want to refer to you just real quick an article written, a law review article written by two conservative constitutional scholars making the case that Donald Trump did engage in insurrection and should have been disqualified for office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now, the Supreme Court said, no, we don't do that here. That's kind of strange. We don't enforce the Constitution when it's politically inconvenient. But I want you just to read a couple of things. So, overall, it seems quite clear to us the specific series of events leading up to and culminating in the January 6, 2021 attack qualifies as an insurrection within the meaning of Section 3, concerted, forcible resistance to the authority of government to execute the laws in at least some significant respect. The large group of people who descended upon, entered, and occupied the U.S. Capitol building used force to prevent a key step in the constitutional transfer of power. The group was in part coordinated, not merely a riot. Some members of the group were armed, and many used force to breach the Capitol to overpower law enforcement there and to effectuate their unlawful aim. Furthermore, it seems that as a whole, the group's goal, to the extent the group had a specific objective in mind, was to disrupt the constitutional transfer of power by disrupting a necessary formal step in the constitutional process. The invasion of the Capitol on January 6th was not simply a violation of the law, though it was, of course, that. It was not merely a protest of a particular legal measure, but a forcible prevention and disruption of it. And it was not the disruption of just any legal measure, but of one that was itself central to the allocation of authority under our Constitution. If this is a fair description of what happened on January 6th, which it is, then that day was something quite different from the more common acts of protest, even disruptive protest. January 6th was an insurrection. To be sure, the events of January 6th itself, the attack on the Congress and the Capitol, did not remotely rival in overall magnitude or in sheer carnage the experience of the U.S. Civil War, where more than 600,000 people died. Still, considered as discrete events, it is notable that more people died and more people were injured as a result of January 6th than this is a big one, just reminds me of a conversation I had with Trump supporters on the U.S. Capitol, then died or suffered injuries as a result on the attack on Fort Sumter. So think about that. Fort Sumter, which was the Confederates' attack, secessionist attack against the Union, it was the event that directly triggered the Civil War. It was the beginning fight, the beginning conflict. More people and more damage was done in terms of death and injury on January 6th than the attack on Fort Sumter. And Fort Sumter, no sane person would argue that Fort Sumter was an insurrection. The events of January 6th match, in their essential elements, concerted resistance to federal authority, serious attempts to frustrate the execution of natural law, attacks on government officials and facilities, intimidation and violence, and arguably exceeded in their seriousness the events of the Whiskey Rebellion, Fry's Rebellion, and other more limited historical insurrections. And at all events, it is less the magnitude or degree of disruption occasioned by an insurrection than whether it fits within the broad meaning of Section 3 as illuminated by evidence of its original meaning and historical understandings. As the prize cases teach, not every insurrection or rebellion ripens to a full-fledged war. Most of the time, the authority of the state can nip it in the bud, but it is still an insurrection. And then it goes on to cite other evidence of insurrection, talking about how acts of Congress, for example, the fact that not only did a majority of the House of Representatives, vote to impeach Donald Trump in part because he committed insurrection, but even a majority of Congress, not the supermajority necessary to remove Trump from office, but a majority of Congress, 57 members of the United States Senate, voted to convict Trump. So a majority of senators at the time agreed that Trump engaged in insurrection. So Donald Trump did engage in insurrection, and Ben Shapiro was right about January 6th being an insurrection and the worst political event, at least since 9/11, a violent riot for which there is no excuse, an attack on U.S. norms of democracy, and something that should be taken very seriously. He was right. And then he became wrong. I'm not sure if it was the beard or if it was grifting or whatever it was, but he betrayed his principles for the sake of political expedience, as many Republicans do, and set all of that aside to endorse, fundraise for, and vote for Donald Trump in the 2024 election. And you can bet your ass that if the shoe was on the other foot and it had been a Democrat on January 6, 2017, when Trump won the election and had to be certified by then Vice President Joe Biden, not only would Ben Shapiro be saying the same shit about January 6, 2021 that he said then, he would actually still maintain it, and he would be very critical of anyone, including any liberal or progressive, who would be willing to set that aside to vote for an insurrectionist or somebody who fomented or inspired an insurrection and not a Republican. right? Imagine if the shoe was on the other foot. He'd be like, liberals, you can't vote for a Democrat who fomented an insurrection. You should put partisanship aside and back the Republican. But when it's a Republican who does it, Ben Shapiro can't, find the patriotism and statesmanship to do just that. So he sweeps it under the rug for political expedience, and he should be relentlessly mocked for it. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.